Hi there, welcome to Lydia's Books. I am Lydia, and today I want to talk about extreme horror. You'll see this big toppling, teetering stack of tomes behind me. That's not all of them. This is my extreme horror collection. So yeah, I'll let you gaze upon its insanity, and I'm reveling in my own insanity for taking them all off the shelf, because a lot of them are collectible. A lot of them are very dear to me, and a lot of them I've had for a long time. Some of them are super new, and I spent money finding them. The impetus of this is not just like my appreciation of extreme horror fiction, which is every single day. I'm still reading through the extreme horror lit subreddit starter pack list. And this is by author Klaus Kinyon, who you may recall of Eternal Flower of Your Soul. And that book was fantastic. I don't have a physical copy of that. I hope that someday it does come to a physical copy so I can add it to this gigantic pile you see before you, behind me. So without much fanfare, I'm going to go through the list, starting out with stuff that is on the extreme horror lit starter pack, and talking about some of the books that aren't here that I have read, some of the books that I have read an e-book of, and some of the books that I want to get. It's that bottom row. I'm down to the bottom row of, well, except for maybe one book of the extreme lit starter pack, and I'm having a lot of fun. So the next book I'll be reading is Full Brutal by Christopher Triana, and we'll talk about Christopher Triana when we get to it in the list. I wish I could stand somewhere where you could see the ginormous stack at all times. But to start off the list, and quite rightfully so, we have Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door and Off Season. So it's Off Season first, then The Girl Next Door. I actually do have a nice collector's edition of Off Season that's not on that stack. This also introduces us neatly to the idea that there are a whole bunch of other books sitting here that are like collector's editions and things that are not on this teetering, toppling tome stack, because I don't want them to come to any more danger than me actually reading them. But yeah, Jack Ketchum, not my first extreme horror, I don't think, but one of the first books that I had to sit down and take a breather and think about what I was reading. I'd have to say I'd read some pretty rough things previously, and I'm still in the hunt to reread some of those, probably Dennis Cooper books that I had read at that time. But yeah, this was one of the first that made me kind of sit back and go, whoa, I need a break. Off Season, Offspring, other Jack Ketchum definitely entered the milieu, because I decided after reading this, probably reading a bunch of Clive Barker too, because I did read a lot of Clive Barker at the time. And I remember the same summer that I read a lot of Kathy Koja, the mysterious possible Dennis Cooper books, Jack Ketchum, specifically The Girl Next Door. I had read American Psycho previously and other Clive Barker, but I read The Great and Secret Show that summer and really liked it. I also read a Magica and didn't like it very much. It stuck with me, but yeah, Great and Secret Show is way better in my opinion. So yeah, Jack Ketchum, of course, starting out this list. Next on the list is The Big Head by Edward Lee. This is not the cover of the one that I want, which is the cover pictured in the starter pack, but hey, reprint, whatever. Fun, crazy fun. If you want to hear someone talk about it recently, Ollie at Criminali recently read The Big Head, and yeah, sums up my thoughts in a lot of ways. It also reminds me a lot of my hometown, and those guys, Dick and Balls, I believe their names are, remind me of people that I know. for sure. Not in their like illegal activities, but their attitudes and demeanor. Now, of course, Edward Lee is just one of my favorites. I do have a lot of Edward Lee stuff, and I have Header, although I don't have the book. I had the book, but now I have the film, and I don't have the book anymore. I've lost a couple books along the way, and for a long time I had lost The Girl Next Door. When I first read The Girl Next Door, it was that coveted edition with the pom-pom skeletal cheerleader on it, and then I gave it back to the used bookstore next door. Whatever, bad decisions abound. I'm missing some books that are in here. I don't have the original copy of Exquisite Corpse, which we'll talk about in a second, but Three Little Pigs is on this list. I might find a copy of it. I've read the stories that are in it, so there's a lot more Edward Lee on the shelves. Edward Lee abounds on my shelves, so I've definitely got my Edward Lee covered. in this little pile, and we talk a little bit about some other heavy hitters in extreme horror fiction as well, because we've got Inside the Works with Tom Piccirilli, Edward Lee, and Gerard Warner. Partners in Chime, which is Edward Lee and Ryan Harding. I am a huge Ryan Harding fan. We'll talk about Ryan Harding in a second. White Trash Gothic, I've got 1 and 2. Brain Cheese Buffet, Edward Lee. Really, really fun stuff. And The Big Head, of course. More Ed Lee in the Portrait of a Psychopath as a Young Woman, which might go really nicely with Victorian Psycho by Edward Lee and Elizabeth Steffen. And this also goes along with Dahmer's Not Dead by the same author. Sorry about the glare there, but I've got this lovely copy that I need to read. I had hunted down this for quite some time. Thank you to Fred's Fine Collectibles for having a copy. Before I talk about these Edward Lees, I've got The Ushers, which I absolutely enjoyed. If you are new to Edward Lee, or you've only read maybe Header with Big Head and want a little bit more of his writing chops, The Ushers is a great collection of short stories. Perfect, like indispensable Edward Lee, I think. Flesh Gothic, super classic in this wonderful edition. I'm very pleased to have this. Now I realize I'm going a little bit fast, but I mean, that's a lot of books still to get through. Edward Lee, Carnal Surgery. Mangled Meat by Edward Lee, super fun. Hunter the Threshold. You will notice that this and Bullet Through Your Face by Edward Lee are maybe not as easy to come by. A lot of these are from Deadite Press, which is defunct, to say the least. Beautiful books, hard to come by for me anyway, especially here in Canada. And yeah, I collected quite a few as I could when they were coming out. Found a lot of them at used bookstores, believe it or not, and have ordered some from collectors too. This one, of course, is not a collectible. You can find it a lot of places, alongside The Black Train, which I have a copy for sale at my Etsy store. And I'll leave a link to that if you're interested at the bottom in the description. But Lucifer's Lottery, really fun book. Edward Lee has a huge fanfic fixation. He writes within the H.P. Lovecraft mythos, and he does a wonderful job with his own style, of course, which is extreme horror for the most part. This is fantastic because you get to hang out with old HPL himself down in the bowels of hell. What more could you want? I lent this to a friend who was going to record at a studio in a different country, the US, different state, let's say, and their band needed some distractions on the road, and I given this. Every single person in the band read it. It was a great time. I actually got it back in really good repair for having lent it to a horror rock band. So hey, really fun story, I think. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with Lucifer's Lottery. I have a lot of fun with The Black Train too, which is a lot more mainstream. Okay, where are we? Poppy Z. Bright, Billy Martin. I have this really, really sweet copy. I found this maybe at a library book sale, or maybe I picked this up at Apport Books in Pennsylvania, in Emmaus, Pennsylvania. What more could you want? I read this and then a whole bunch of other Poppy Z. Bright when I was a teen in those hot summers, right? And I love this book. I loved my reread of this book. I love owning this particular copy of this book, and I'm very pleased that it's on this list. Another classic heavy hitter, J.F. Gonzalez, Survivor. I didn't think it lived up to the hype. I'll leave that for you to decide. A lot of people love this book, so I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but you know, there's other books in this list that I would count as more extreme. You know, it doesn't strike me as too extreme, but then we've also been tainted. When Survivor came out, maybe we hadn't had as many thrillers and crime novels that really dip into some really extreme territory. This is like 20 years old, almost. Another Deadite Press book. So I do have quite a bit of Deadite Press on my shelves. I love having it. You know, if you are ever parting with Deadite Press books, let me know. Cows by Matthew Stokoe. I only read the ebook of this book. I want to read some of his other work. Of course, he's a great writer, but this is a rough read and a bizarre read. I laughed out loud and cringed while reading this. It was good. It was fun. This was a recent read for me and a gap I needed to fill at the beginning of this list. The Summer I Died by Ryan C. Thomas. I really, really, really like this. I want to read the rest of them. I want to read more from this author. And I had the same reaction with Christopher Triana, because as you can tell, I've got quite a lot of the old guard splatterpunk and extreme horror authors, more of the extreme than the OG splatterpunks, maybe, if you draw a line in the sand between those two subgenres. But the new splatterpunks I hadn't read a lot of, so this was fun for me. Now, His Pain by Wrath James White and The Resurrectionist I don't have. I have His Pain somewhere and I can't find it, which is driving me a little batty. I don't have The Resurrectionist. I lent it out to someone. I know I got it back, but then I don't know what I did with it. I might have gotten rid of it when I got rid of my copy of Triage, not realizing how important those books would be to me. But I do have Like Porno for Psychos, and it's a pretty rough cover. So is Population Zero. Maybe I shouldn't be showing these on YouTube. Pure hate. Here's a nice, safe cover. Yeah, Wrath James White is a great person. He's really cool to listen to talk as well. So if you have ever tuned into Horror Writers Association or related interviews on YouTube or have gone to see him talk, wow. Really cool to listen to talk about writing, about poetry, and just a really cool person. So yeah, Wrath James White, specifically The Resurrectionist. I love that book. A lot of people talk about how it's kind of childish or amateurish or rough around the edges, or it feels like you're reading a first draft. You kind of are. I've heard him say that it was a rough and raw kind of writing, and when he sent it off to be read, they liked it as it was. So no polish was needed at the time. I mean, it could be polished. I like it as it is too. It is a rough and ready little book, and the film is really interesting too. Genital Grinder by Ryan Harding. I love this book. This might be another cover. Well, I don't know. I don't know. It's just really looks like a lot of guts, but nothing you wouldn't see on like the floor of a charnel house. But yeah, I really, really, really like Ryan Harding, and it's another author I love hearing him talk about writing. He's very appreciative of good reviews as well. And yeah, Genital Grinder is a great book. It's dark, and it is sort of, to me, the epitome of really good writing that has something to say. And the idea of splatterpunk, where it is, splatter and gore and reality and terrifying, terrible, gory things alongside some very important, very real societal ills. And this is a really good read. So yeah, if you can hunt down Genital Grinder, we have his and hers copies in this house. Now, for Aaron Beauregard, another great author to hear talk, there used to be a podcast, Written in Red, that had him and other Nate Southard, and maybe Daniel Volpe was on the podcast. Anyhow, I digress. I don't have a physical copy of Playground. I might someday. It's interesting. There's some things in there that are written a little bit rough, and not rough, raw, and ready the way The Resurrectionist is written, but things that needed to be fixed. But the Slob, I don't think there's anything that needs to be fixed in this. This is fun. A lot of people say that the Slob is a bit amateurish, but I don't think so. I have a lot of fun with the Slob. I like the story of the Slob. I like the story of a girl having to clean things, right? Like, because I spent some time as a cleaner as well, and I've always been interested, even though I didn't do it, in crime scene cleaning. And if this would have been a crime scene cleaner, well, I'd have never put this book down. I had a lot of fun with the Slob, and it was another one of those newer writers. I had read it before discovering the Extreme Horror Lit starter pack, but the internet definitely introduced me to Aaron Beauregard. Christopher Triana is a new favorite for me as well. Gone to See the Riverman. It was a book that I had been hunting for a couple years. Figured, of course, it would be on this list. Full Brutal is one I'm going to be reading this coming month because I've not read it yet, but these are back-to-back on the Extreme Horror starter pack list. I loved Gone to See the Riverman. A lot of people had problems with it. A lot of people love it the way I do. I wish I could afford to buy all of the Christopher Triana books because he has quite a lot and a lot of special editions. So if you like collecting, Christopher Triana will avail you. Dead Inside. This book set the internet on fire, and then the internet set it on fire. It was just a mutually toxic relationship. But yeah, speaking of mutually toxic relationships, that is what Dead Inside is about at its core. I really liked it. I think he's a fantastic writer. I hope that people stop reading this as a dare and actually appreciate the book for what it is. I really like Chandler Morrison stuff, and there's another one in the addendum pile. The addendum pile is going to be some tangential books that are related to this list, because so far I'm still sticking to the starter pack for the most part, except for some of my very favorite authors that I already collected. But Duncan Ralston is a new favorite of mine. He's a Canadian author too, so he gets extra points for that. I really had a lot of fun with Womb. And the weirdest thing was being in this new little bookstore, a very quaint little hipster bookstore that doesn't really sell horror at all. I just went to check it out, and the person working, within a few sentences of an exchange was like, "Hey, have you ever read Womb by Duncan Ralston? I'm reading it right now." And it's like, wow. I also have a second copy of this that I'm going to put on my Etsy store. I found it at a book sale at my work. So other people read Womb. I'm surprised. But yeah, this is really, really fun. It is sort of a short little vignettes, not totally little short stories, but all these little vignettes come together to tell the full story. And yeah, it's a doozy. So now we are into sort of the end of that list for me. I have a whole other row, except for Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke, which I need to have a physical copy of. I think that's fun. I like a lot of his other work. Eric LaRocca is one of those writers that it's not really all extreme, of course, and a lot of his later work hasn't been as dark and disturbing as some people found that particular book. But yeah, there's nothing else on there. I really want to get to the John Athan stuff. Like, all of it's very interesting to me. So that brings me to Richard Laymon, one of my favorite authors, and one that some people count within one of the most extreme horror authors they've ever read. And others also count him as a writer of schlocky B-grade mainstream horror, and that is all. So it's really however you take your horror fiction to be, where he sits. I consider him an extreme horror author, for sure. Maybe one of the Splatterpunks. I'm not really, I don't draw that many lines in the sand with this particular subgenre, but he does write extreme horror fiction. And there are books of his that, have set a tone and introduced a lot of people to darker horror fiction. It's also highly collectible, so I really do enjoy having what beautiful collectible Richard Laymon that I do have. And if you've watched the show, I do have an entire almost entire collection of his Dorchester paperbacks. So I really, really love Richard Laymon. I wish he was included more often. Some people would say, why isn't he included on the starter pack? Maybe he's not considered by all to be an extreme horror author. But then again, some of the people featured in the pages of Splatterpunk magazine are not either. So we've got like Jeff Strand, a lot of people don't think of as an extreme horror author, yet he is a Splatterpunk writer. Daniel Volpe, Rain Havoc, Patrick C. Harrison, some really wonderful names in here. Brian Keene, Ryan Harding, Bracken McLeod, Ryan C. Thomas, some great stuff. I just got my first Bracken McLeod book edited by Jack Bantry. Thank you so much, Jack, for making this particular zine. I think I have one or two other ones that I've lost or are hiding. Adam Millard, Candace Nola, Bridget Nelson, and RJ Daly, and I believe Adam Caesar has a story in one of these as well. Grant Lee Morrison, Aaron Beauregard, Tom Over, and Janine Pipe. Yeah, really wonderful stuff. If you are so lucky to have all of the Splatterpunks or are ever parting with one, let me know. But yeah, I have wished I could have started collecting these a lot sooner. But wait, there's more, because I am only halfway through this stack. Why? Because there's a whole bunch of tangential stuff that I want to talk about. These are some books that I think should be or could be part of this starter pack as well. So if you've not read a lot of that stuff, but you've read these, you're still in good hands. Pain Freak by Gerard Warner. I'm very pleased to own this because my introduction to Pain Freak was the sort of like tribute anthology into Pain Freak. And this is a collection with a lot of the heavy hitters and top names in horror and extreme horror. Lucy Taylor, Charlie Jacob, Chesia Burke, John Urbanek, Linda Addison, Ryan D. Chandler, Ralph James White, Monica J. O'Rourke, Michael T. Hayek, Jeff Strand, John Evanson, K. Trap Jones, Jordan Krall, Ryan Harding, Tony Tremblay, Jeffrey Thomas, Colleen Wagland, Edward Lee, edited by Gerard Warner. So yeah, really, really fantastic foundational splatterpunk writing. I was lucky enough to also be able to get a copy of Road to Hell by Gerard Warner. I've not read enough Gerard Warner, but the company he kept has convinced me he's a god. Wesley Southard, One for the Road. Suburban Gothic with Brian Keene and Brian Smith. Extreme horror, splatterpunks, like some of the most important splatterpunk writing. 65 Stirrup Iron Road. Now this is Brian Keene, Jack Ketchum, Edward Lee, J.F. Gonzalez, Brian Smith, Ralph James White, Nate Southard, Ryan Harding, and Shane McKenzie. Probably one of the most important short fiction collections ever. And of course, that's just scratching the surface. There are hundreds and hundreds of these small collections, chapbooks, collectibles, Deadite press books I've never read, authors I've never heard of within extreme and splatterpunk horror. And it's a beautiful, exciting, rich, diverse subgenre, of course. Now there's also tangential stuff, brand new splatterpunks, things that are kind of slipstream and disturbing books. You got a lot of transgressive literature that sort of ekes its way in. It's sort of in that Venn diagram adjacent to extreme horror. So that's the end of our stack here. A bit of like further reading or things that you might have read or that I've talked about on the show. Gathering of Evil by Gil Valley. Maybe not the best dyed-in-the-wool extreme horror book, but it has some snuff film kind of things and weird cabal of rich torturers. And he's written by the guy that made headlines as the Cannibal Cop, because he's not a cannibal, but he was guilty of thought crimes, if anything at all, by chatting about cannibalism on a forum, an internet forum. But being a cop, you know, I love the cover of this book, though, by the way. I'm going to stop putting them all back there because, like, it's just too much. Nicole Cushing, oh my God. Mr. Suicide, I don't have a copy of anymore. And I don't know, there's other Nicole Cushing that I have here. Children of No One is just what I have in with my chapbooks here. I really highly recommend Nicole Cushing's work as far as transgressive literature or just sort of like that horror adjacent slipstream speculative fiction that's just extremely well written. So A Sick Grey Laugh is one that I really highly recommend. Yeah, really like Nicole Cushing's work. Mothwoman was really great too. She won a Bram Stoker Award for Mr. Suicide, but there was a book right after that was just fantastic. Closer, Dennis Cooper. Frisk is great too. There's other Dennis Cooper I need to read because there was a Dennis Cooper book I think I read a long time ago, and I need to stumble upon that story again. But yeah, maybe not extreme horror, but often included in the conversation. And then you get people that start the conversation. Juan Valencia's Poking Holes. Again, transgressive literature, a little bit extreme, very dark. People mention it in the extreme horror lit subreddit from time to time. And as Plagued by Visions, his channel really introduced a lot of people to disturbing fiction. So cool, in fact, that he spearheaded this charity anthology, Look at Our Holes, which is on my reading list for this coming month, and it features other booktubers as well. I'm very excited. Edited by Juan Valencia, concept by Valerie Complex. Look at Our Holes, an anthology of voids and orifices. Despumation, maybe not extreme, but it is dark literature, and it is a metal anthology, a metal themed dark weird horror. The Bedwetter by Lee Allen Howard and Stories of the Piss Fairy. It is really, really strange and grotesque and maybe a little bit bizarro, but typically I don't like bizarro. I found this crazy enough. It was right up there with Joyce Carol Oates' Zombie, which could also be on this list. I didn't dig that book out. It's not in this stack, but The Bedwetter. I got to sit next to this author and didn't realize who he was until after I left the meal, and I was like, oh no, I should have asked him about The Bedwetter, because I really love this book, and I've talked about it briefly a while ago on the channel. If you've read it, let me know. Journal of a Budding Psychopath. Stillborn Gallery in Ickville. by Axel Barnes. Really good stuff, really dark, extreme-ish stuff, but a dark literature, transgressive literature. It is definitely splatterpunk within Stillborn Gallery, and it's illustrated, which is great because a lot of people do include things like Crossed in their extreme horror literature. I do as well, but it seems so much more fun because it's illustrated in a comic book fashion. But yeah, Stillborn Gallery, Axel Barnes, if you want something different and darker and a lot more academic, then that might be up your alley. Waif by Samantha Klosnek, and by name also hashtag Thigh Gap by Chandler Morrison. We're sort of bringing it all home with a Chandler Morrison book, but these aren't necessarily extreme. They're by an author who have written extreme things or very dark transgressive literature in true crime and of course Dead Inside. I'd say that they're very adjacent to the genre, and a lot of people who read the genre also enjoy their work as well. So yeah, I really do say read outside of it too. Some people read all in on extreme and splatterpunk only, and that's great if that's what you enjoy. I only enjoy horror for the most part, so I can understand. But it's nice to read the other works by those authors as well, even if it's not within your genre envelope. So 50 splatterpunk and extreme horror books, and some of the splatterpunk zine as a bonus. I hope that you enjoyed this journey through my collection as it is so far. Maybe in a year or two, when I'm done reading the extreme horror lit starter pack and have added more titles to my collection, I'll do the 50 plus books, whatever comes after, right? And just sort of refer everyone to this video where we go through the extreme horror collection as it stands, minus of course all the other Jack Ketchum, Edward Lee, and Richard Laymon that I have in paperback form on this shelf over here. So yeah, maybe we'll talk about the stuff that I acquire in the next year to come. If you have read all of these, more of this, or some of these, let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and have an ooky, spooky day.